Right, so we've got our little blue tit. Hopefully you've all managed to trace it and sketch it up. So what we'll do is we'll start off with the dinky tiny detail of the eye. If you have a very tiny brush that you can paint in the black eye, do so. If you don't, you could use a black pen that's waterproof to colour it in. Anything that's fine. So only attempt to paint it in if you have a very sharp, tiny, fine brush. If not, you could use your watercolour pencils, you could use a black pen or black rye because it's so minute and so tiny. Okay. So because just to make it easy for you, I'll try and fit a bit up below. I'm just going to go around. And this, I've made sure that the pen that I'm using is fully waterproof so that it shouldn't run. Okay. And as with all of the eyes, I tend to leave a little bit too much highlight exposed. So too much white in the eye, essentially, until the last minute touch-ups. So there's still too much white in my eye at the moment. So I'm probably going to stop there and let it get bone dry. Okay. And while that's getting bone dry, let's start off with a wash. So if we look at our bird, we've got some really lovely soft yellow tones and bluish greys on the top. Just for argument's sake, it's probably easier just to work at the top and work down or from one side across, so you're not always smudging your work. Okay, for this one. So we're going to need to mix up a nice blue. And to me, that blue tit looks as though it's very much a cobalt blue colour. So I'll just show you my cobalt blue. And you can see how it's a good match to the bluebird's head. Okay, so we're definitely going to need some cobalt blue. And then if I'm looking at the tail, it's got a slightly brighter flash to it on the tail. So I'm thinking, right, I'm probably going to need a sort of a turquoisey, either a bit of Windsor blue green shade or a turquoisey colour. And if I add a cobalt blue and a little bit of a sort of turquoisey colour to it, it's lifting it slightly. I hope you can see the difference between those two colours. So I'll be using this colour on the tail and we're going to be using this colour on the head. Let's get our brush. We're going to glaze a little bit of water, only a tiny, just a couple of little dabs, nothing too serious. And I'm going to pick up my diluted neutral grey colour. And I'm going to do a very, very weak wash of this greyish tone. It's going to be really weak. Okay, the reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to put the cobalt blue over the top, but it's going to look a bit duller because I've got this greyish tone underneath. Okay, so you can see it's hardly anything. It's just enough so that when I put my blue over the top, it's going to make it go a bit dull. I'm just dotting it in. Okay, and then I'm just going to drag this down a little bit more. Just dabbing it, just tapping it. And we can just scoop up a bit of colour with a tiny little brush, and let's just put a bit on the beak. This is dry paint. I'll leave a little bit of a gap. Not too drastic. And then this is where the dark bit goes. So I've just tapped a little bit of grey in there. Hope you can see that as well. This bit here looks black. So let's pick up our black colour. We want it to be quite strong with a tiny, tiny brush. And we're just going to do, I'm flicking downwards, and I'm just going to just do a few little flecks around him. Okay, because it's actually nearly white at the end, and then he's got a dark beak. There we go. Okay. And then what we can do now is around here it looks black, so I'm just going to do a little tap 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 around here, and then it sort of disappears into the blue, doesn't it? So if I just wiggle my brush, so this is a damp clean brush now, and I'm just going to tease that edge, just give it a little tickle just to soften it a bit, and that means that I can start to bring the blue into it. There we go. So let's just soften that edge. I've just given it a little tickle. And then the same with the other side. So if I just pick up my greyish blackish tone, it's stronger by the eye itself, and then it starts to fade out. So have it strong right by the eye. Like that. And then I'm going to wash out my brush, and then I'm just going to flick it a bit more. There we go. And because I'm deliberately tapping my brush to give it a little bit of texture, because we want to suggest this blue tit's a bit feathery. So that's why I'm tapping with my colour. Normally we always about glazing carefully, having a light pressure, filling in the colour so that it's all smooth. But with this bird, especially we're going to want to suggest some texture in it. So that's why I'm tapping the colour on a little bit, so that when it dries, hopefully it might sort of suggest a little bit of texture onto it. Let's go up to the top, and I'm just wetting that tiny bit of water, and the back of the head looks slightly greyish, so I'm doing it very, very sheer, just like I did with the back of the collar. I'm just going to put the tiniest little bit of grey there, and then I'm going to soften that. So I'm immediately washing my brush. So this is now, I've got rid of my paint on this. This is a clean, damp brush. Okay, and I'm just going to wiggle that edge just to break it up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just going to wiggle it there. So it's very pale and quite weak. So I'm looking at weak squash. Okay, not much paint there at all. Okay, and I'm just wiggling it. So this is a damp brush that might have a slight trace of colour on it, hardly anything at all. So effectively, this is like doing like a slight tonal underwash. So this is my greyish tone, and I'm going to warm that up a smidge, because that's going to be a bit too cold for the underbelly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some yellow ochre to my grey, and can you see how it's now gone that nice? It's got an olivey colour, sort of a dull greyish olivey colour. I'll just do this wash at the bottom. So I'm going to glaze this with water because I want to make sure this goes on smoothly. So I'm going to put the glaze on at the tummy, follow the edge. So this gives us blending time. We're not going to go over the entire area, we're going to fizzle it out, which I know is something that some of you ladies like to practice. Okay, so though I've put water on the whole area, but I'm not going to paint in the whole area. So I'm now picking up this dull colour that I've mixed, and I'm just going to put it around the bottom of my bird. There we go, a bit there, and perhaps a bit round there. So the colour's already immediately softened for me, so that's the advantage of wetting the area with water. And I'm just going to guide it around a little bit. Okay, just to make sure that this is soft. And I'm just going to wiggle that edge a little bit. And I might do a tiny little bit of a patch there, actually. Just a smearing. And it can go a little bit underneath the tail feather, just there. So this is sort of like an underwash. Sort of. It just gives us a little bit of tone before we put the yellow on the top. Okay, so we're going to just let that settle. So now we're going to put a little bit of, I'm going to start to introduce the yellow in a little bit and the blue as well. Okay, so let's get some of this nice cobalt blue on our birdie, shall we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the cobalt blue, and I want to keep it nice and bright. So it's cobalt blue with a tiniest smidge of turquoise to it, just to make sure it stays nice and bright. Okay, and it's quite weak consistency. If you look at the photographic reference, it's quite textured, the patch on the top of his head. So I'm just going to start stroking the colour on in little flicks. So it's stronger down here where we put our grey. So the very short little marks I'm making. Okay, so you can see it's very textured. And then I'm going to pick up a tiniest bit of my cobalt blue and make it quite weak, because at the front, and there's a little highlight at the cap at the front of the bird, so you want to make sure that the consistency of the paint is really quite thin, so just enough to keep that colour in that head. Okay, by flicking it. Okay, there we go. So now we can start to go around the back of his collar, and because we've got this colour underneath, I'm hoping it's going to start to look quite dull. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the bird, and there's lots of flick marks going from left to right. So I'm sort of working in to the bird like this. And I'm going to start flicking it like that. And then I'm going to pick up some more cobalt blue. So adjust the strength that you need to. So that is beginning to look a little bit too weak in consistency. I'm just picking up a bit, making it a little bit stronger. So again, I'm just hatching this colour on. I'm not attempting to do a smooth glaze at all. I don't want it to be a smooth glaze. I want to have some texture in this lovely little bird. So it's not smooth. I'm doing lots of little patchy marks or lots of flicks with my little birdie. Okay. And then we can just do 1 or 2 strong little marks there. Oh, that's not too much. Now, I'm now going to pick up a tiny bit of black and dab it on my brush. And I want to get this a bit darker in here. So again, this is dry. And I'm just flicking this on, which is why, again, this would be useful or really good to do with your watercolor pencils, because effectively I'm just doing lots of little lines as I'm coming down here, lots of little flicks to come down. There's a little patch there as well, and then yeah, we can start to put in a few little lines. So these are up and down marks that I'm doing. So again, I wanted to get this nice texture for this little birdie. Okay. And then down here. So it's all dry brush work, just with a tiny brush, just doing lots of little dashy marks here and there, which you, as I say, you could do with your watercolor pencils if you wanted to. Okay. And then we've got, yeah, we've got a line there. We could just put that on dry. Like that. Right, so washed out my brush, and we're going to tackle the back of the bird. So it's looking quite pale. It's got a slight silvery colour to it. I think it's got a merest hint of blue in its back. So what I'm going to do is just wet it with water there. And I'm going to pick up my palest turquoise. So it's almost contaminated water, I suppose. Hardly anything. And I'm just going to do a merest smidge there and a little bit there. So it's almost contaminated water there. And oh yeah, you can see it on a little further. So now I'm picking up that diluted colour, which was fine for the tail, which is that weaker colour. So it's the cobalt blue with the turquoise, and we've got a sort of silvery colour on this little feather just here. And then what I'm doing is I'm softening that edge. Just make sure you keep the white bar in. So now that that's dried, I'm going to pick up some yellow. So these are my yellow colours. So what we're going to do now, on the back, the yellow looks quite weak. So we're going to have a weak consistency. So I've got my lemon yellow, and I'm just going to put a glaze over the top here. Just like that. Just dot it on. Like that. And don't forget it will dry paler as well. And then as it gets lower down, it changes to a more of a greyish tone. So I'm fizzling out that edge. Okay. So this area, its shoulder, is there's no yellow in that area. Okay. And then up the front, the yellow looks really strong. So we want our yellow paint to be thicker, to echo the fact that it's a strong consistency. So I've got yellow paint on my brush, but it's quite thick. It's not dripping with colour. Okay, so I'm going to have a go at just painting it on with a dry brush, so it's quite strong. There we go. Dabbing it on. Now I'm going to do a wash. And I'm going to drop this and I'm going to do a wash over. And I'm painting in all directions. Okay, and I'm just putting, so this is the lemon yellow, the pale lemon yellow, and I'm doing it all over the top. So it's going all over the entire under area of the bird, all over. And you can see where we've done that little subtle underglaze, it's given some texture to the bird, but it's made it all go that lovely yellow colour that we want. And what I might do is make that a little bit more cadmium yellow once it's dry, I think. Smidge. You can see how we've got that nice texture in the undercarriage of the bird now. Okay, so let's move on and we'll do start to do the wings, because we've got some nice bluish tones and greyish tones as well, haven't we? So on the tail here, on the wings, it's looking grey, but a warm grey almost, with a hint of brown in it. So we're going to need to be careful to leave these white bars in, and then we bring these across. So we want this colour to be smooth. I'm probably being a bit overly fussy, but I'm just going to do a little wiggle of water across that line, just roughly, just to make sure that I've got the chance to blend this edge. And then I'm looking, thinking, yep, I want to have a bit in there. Some of the edges here, so I have some around the edge there. I suppose if you wanted to be really careful, I suppose you could use your masking fluid to do these white lines, but I think can't really do that very much, so I'm just wiggling these edges. This one here doesn't need that, it's on the very, very edge. And these need pulling that way. So I'm just wiggling the edges with a dry, damp clean brush. Okay. Now let's get this blue in. So I'm returning to my cobalt blue, and I've put in a little bit of turquoise with it just to keep it bright. So you could use Wings of Blue Green shade, or if you've got cobalt turquoise light or something like that, just so you've got a really nice turquoisey colour, or a nice cobalt bluish, bright cobalt blue colour. Okay, so that's a real strong cobalt blue. Okay, and then here's my turquoisey colour. Slight difference between the two. And just paint them on as to what you think. So again, get the small brush. Right, so we've got a little smidge there, and it's looking quite cobalt bluish, so I'm just going to do a little sweep there, just like that, filling it in. There's a little bar there, but I'll just give it a little more down, and then we've got some colours here. Oh, they're quite subtle there, so what I'm going to do is just pull that down. We've got a slight hint of yellow on top of our blue, so I think if we just do a very nice delicate wash over here, so let's just whack that on and just soften it with water so it's quite weak, and then I'm just going to paint up to the white line. I don't want that to be too strong, so I'm trying to just blend it out a little bit. So we're going to hopefully achieve this in a couple of layers. There we go. Just going to give that, let that just dry. There we go. So it's all up to the edge. And then what we need to do is put in some shadow. So this is the grey colour that I had, that sort of brownish grey tone, which is a little strong. So what I'm going to do is just wash my brush out, and then I'm going to drag it over a little bit. So I just want to get a little bit of the suggestion of shadow, and then I'm flicking it with my hand like that. So it's a clean, damp, almost bone dry brush. And then down here is darker. So let's pick up that bluish, brownish, greyish tone that I was talking about. And we've got a bit there. Going down. And we've got another bit there. And then this bit's really dark. So I'm now painting, this is just a bone dry brush. And we've got a dark line there. I'm just putting it in. So this colour is not dark enough at the moment, but I'm just doing it as an underline, just to remind me that it's there. And then we've got some dark lines here. So again, we're going to be using this brownish, greyish, dark colour. And we're going to paint the tail. So this is dry, no wetting. And then I'm going above, and then I'm leaving a tiny, tiny gap. And I'm just dragging it across. So again, if you don't have a brush that you feel that's got a good enough point, you could do this in pencil. And don't panic about whether it's too dark yet. You can always go over the top. Like that. I'm now flicking back again to the blue. So I'm going to pick up the blue, and I'm just going to re-wet it a little bit because it's quite a large area and we want to have it that nice bright colour. So I'm just pulling that in. So because I've softened this area with water, it means that I can leave a slight bit of highlight because I can blend the edges a little bit. I've got time to wiggle my brush. I'm just picking up the Caldwell blue again, and I'm just going to do another, whoops, a little bit too strong. I'll smooth that out in a minute. Oops. Right, so if I wipe this with a clean damp brush, I've just softened that strength, because you do want it a smidge stronger at the end. And I want it a smidge stronger down here. So this is damp, and it's not too strong. So I'm just going to let that go a little bit. And then I want to make sure that there's a highlight. So if we press down and just drag the brush across with my damp brush, I just want to make sure that I get a slight ridge to it. And then we've got the white highlight on the end of the bird, which you won't show up on my paper, so I'm going to probably do something like that. Right. And then I'm going to wiggle this edge here, because the feather comes up into the blue. So I need to make sure that that edge is soft. There. And colouring that edge there. There we go. Right. So now I'm going to do his shoulder. And it's sort of a greeny greyish colour. So you can use that olive green from the tummy and perhaps add a tiny little bit more blue to it to make it a little bit cooler. Do you think you've got the right colour? And then I'm just dotting in the colour around it. And again, I'm deliberately trying to make it patchy. I'm dotting it around because I don't want it to I don't want it to be too smooth. And then let's get a patch of nice cobalt blue for the shoulder. It's looking nice and strong. So I'm painting this in relatively dry. There we go. I might make that a little bit more bluish. a bit more cobalty blue. Mine's a little bit turquoisey. And then I'm going to tap in a little bit around here. Okay, so we still need some grey down here, I think. So this is just grey. I'm going to have it fairly weak, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cobalt blue over the top. I'm going to reserve that bar right down there. There we go. Got a clean damp brush now. And I'm just going to put some texture in. So this is all dry brushwork. Now I'm just sort of doing crisscross hatchy marks, following the directions of the bars of the wings. Okay, don't be afraid to tap it or blot it with your finger so we can get some softness going. So I'm just pulling it down and working towards the grey shoulder so that I'm getting the bars of these feathers. I'm just dragging and pulling, and then I'm just gradually getting rid of the white. Oh, I know we don't want it. Okay. And then here we don't want to have a perfect edge. We need this edge to be broken. So we'll be doing some dashes on that just to make sure that that looks flicked and uneven. So I'm not pre-wetting anything at the moment. I'm using a dry brush and I'm just tapping or flicking on the colour to give me some texture. Okay, so it's smooth on the wings, so I can do longer sweeps on the wings. So I've just filled in that shoulder blade and I'm just going to let it settle. So this is contaminated water. This is my paint and I'm using it very thinly, and I'm just going to very lightly with a damp brush. Okay, I'm just darkening it a little bit more. I don't want it to be too strong, so I'll just wiggle it. I just want to bring it up a little bit darker. It's very, very subtle. Okay. There we go. So if you want to get more texture in your little birdie or underline things, okay, we can use a hard pencil. So around here, there's lots. So all I'm doing is little dashes around the eye, just to suggest some texture around our little birdie. And I'm actually going to have to harden his beak a little bit. Okay, so this is how we can start to get a little bit more texture in him. Okay, just by doing a few little wiggles or a few little strokes. Okay, so if we look at this study, we are still too pale, aren't we, in a lot of areas, so that is good news. So are you all ready to start getting stuck into a bit more? We're going to start off by putting a very sheer wash in the white honey's white face. So I'm going to be using a grey, slightly bluish grey or colour, and it's literally contaminated water. It is so unbelievably weak. Look, can you barely see it on the plate? There's hardly anything there. You may not even be able to see it on camera, but if you look at your photographic reference, you should see that there's, in the cheek of the bird, this, although it looks pure white, there's lots of texture and little bits on the cheek. So I'm going to suggest this with this contaminated water that I look, which is so sheer you can hardly see it on the paper. Okay, you could use it with just a little bit of pencil if you wanted to. So if I just wiggle this around, okay, and dab it around, okay, tapping it because I want the texture, and flicking it out, okay, it is now taken. I don't have just an empty blank patch now. You can actually see some rings. He's got under eye wrinkles, and a little bit there that goes to his beak. So this is just contaminated water. It's so thin, like that. And then, oh, we need to do his top beak. So I'm just picking up that sort of Payne's grey colour. It needs to be stronger. And I'm just doing it with a dry brush. Just doing a little flick there. And we need to make sure that it's dark here. So this bit, right by his beak, is not dark enough, which is good news. So I'm also almost doing ziggy-zaggy, uppy, downy marks, because I want this to be textured. So by building this up gradually, he needs a little bit on top of his eye. So again, you could do this with your pen if you wanted to, or a pencil. If you don't think your if you don't think your brush can do his eye fine enough. And then I'm just going to go again around there, and give a bit more there on his schnoz. A bit. And then I'm just going to wiggle that edge because I'm trying to preserve that highlight on top of the beak, so don't forget the highlight around the beak. And then what we can do is do just a wiggle of the merest smidge. It's up to us really without this blue tip, but I've got this merest hint of this greyish bluish colour, and I'm just doing the tiniest little bit on his head, just to make sure that that bit on the back of his head is not pure brilliant white. What we need to do now is to start to define these wings a bit better. So if you squint at the picture, I mean, obviously this is in shadow to the right hand side, it's not that dark, but if I'm squinting at my work, this bit is nearly right, but this bit needs a little bit of yellow over the top. I can see it's got that sort of hint of green in his wing. So because we're going to put the yellow over the top, there, I've now got that hint of green that I can see. And then at the end here, it's going back to blue. So the blue goes there. So I can see it there. And then I'm just going to drag it to the end. So at the moment, I've made everything light. And I might put a tiny bit more blue. And we're missing the let's just pull that across and pull that down. So we're missing the lines or the definition between the wings. I'm not going to worry about that too much yet. The main thing is to get the colour on, doing all in the bars. Okay. Now there's almost a white highlight on there, which I can't really show up in my picture. I'll probably define that with a bit of edge. And then we've got this little underwing here, which is again that sort of brownish, greyish colour. So underneath it looks almost black. On top it looks almost warm. So if I just paint on that with a fine line, you could use pencil with this. Because this work, or this bird, is quite small, that's why I was suggesting that you could use your watercolour pencils if you wanted to. Because effectively we're just drawing on some fine lines like that. Now let's get this on stronger. So it's going there, down here, down there. There's another little line there. And then we've got lots of dark bits that we need down here. So I've just got some paint on my brush, and I'm just very carefully flicking it. So this edge here needs to come down a little bit. Made mine a little bit flat, so what I'm doing is thinking, yeah, probably need to bring this down a little bit more. Like that. And then there's the dark edge there. So I'm trying to underline all the little pieces of the bars of the wing. Let's put in the feet. Okay, so I've just got essentially a neutral greyish blackish colour. So we can just paint this in, and then we're going to make it look textured. So make sure you've got a nice small brush. This one's probably a little bit big, but I might change it a little bit in a minute. So I'm doing horizontal marks. Because I want to have that textured effect. I'm rinsing out my brush, and then I'm going to flick that out. So I'm deliberately trying not to make it look too smooth. Now, this bit round here needs to be smoother because of the highlight. So I am softening that with a smidge of water. So I'm mixing up, just warming up my black a little bit. It's a little bit too cold. So I am putting the dark colour on the edge. And then what I'm trying to think about is where the highlight is on the claw. And then I'm going to wiggle the edge a bit. There we go. And then that needs to go up there. So if I get a dry brush and just do a little dot here, and then we're going to go up to there. That's better. So now I'm just going round. And I'm sort of tapping, so I'm trying to suggest some texture. And then let's do the same for this one. So this one we can see more clearly. And I'll be painting that on dry in a minute. So this one I am going to wet with water first. Just makes it a bit easier. And I'm just going to probably drop in also a bit of fleck of blue as it comes down to the claws. So this bit here, wet with water first, and then I'm just going to drop in that grey. There we go. Like that. I'm just dragging it down, and then I'm going to stop at the base of the ankle there. And then I'm going to pick up some blue, and I'm going to drag it down into here. So I'm now going almost nothing, because I'm just trying to get the colours to blend. So I've picked up the dark grey again, and I'm going back, touch it up to make it darker, and there, and a bit here. And I need to wiggle that a little bit, just tap it, and we need to get rid of that. So that needs to be yellow, or dirty yellow anyway. So if we just give that a little wiggle, there we go. So I'm going back to the grey. So again, this is where because we're getting quite tiny now, this is where it would be useful for you to use your watercolour pencils if you wanted to. And I'm just wiggling it around a bit. So I'm just wiggling around with what paint I've got left on my brush. So this claw goes under like that, and then goes round, and then we've got a dark claw here. So if you don't have a fine enough brush, you could use a pencil to help define it for you. And then it's got a couple of creases here where his foot is. So now that I can see that, I can follow my pencil line, and I can pick up some more black and make sure I've got it. If you twist and pull your brush, you'll get a nice point to it. Okay, so all the time I'm gradually getting darker. So this is painted on dry, and by doing it this way, it just gives me a bit more time. So there's the other side of the foot. Okay. And this bit's still too light, which is good. It means I can go over again. Let's perhaps a few little dots. Okay. So I can get a better looking foot for the birdie, because they have such rough, scaly feet. Now I'm going again around here, making sure that that edge there is dark, really dark, and so that's really beginning to bring the foot out the way that I want it to. So again here, just do a few little dots, dashes, little hatchy marks. Bring it darker and darker until it's the way that you want it to be. And there's a suggestion there. Right, so let's pick up a big brush and do a wash for the twig. It's entirely up to you whether you want to keep the suggestion of liching on it, or whether you say we can just do a wash of a branch. So I'm just going to do a wash of a branch, do a little bit of a suggestion for you, a little bit of both. So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of patch around here, and I'm just doing some wiggles, just very roughly, looking at the picture, not being too faithful. Doesn't really matter too much. I'm not really going to attempt to do the liching too much because it'll take too long, and it's something that you could just do with dots and dashes sort of thing. Okay, we just want to have a little bit of texture on this before we go back and touch up some more detail on the bird. So when you're ready, we want to soften this with water, scoop up a bit of colour, okay, and then by tapping it in randomly or in odd patches, you're going to get a nice uneven, patchy looking branch or twig, which in this instance is what we want. So that's why I've pre-wetted it, so that I've got some patchiness, so I can tap in a bit there and a bit more over here. I might tap in a bit there. So I'm deliberately making it uneven. You don't have to, but this is what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm washing out my brush so it's clean and damp, and then I'm just going to soften with a few wiggles this edge here. So now that that's getting damp, I'm going to go back with some more brown. Could be greyish brown, blackish brown, doesn't really matter. Okay, and I'll say, right, I want to tap in a bit around there, and I want to have a tap in a bit there, and I want a dark bit there where the claw is, and I'm going to tap in a bit there, so it's really dark there. And then because this is damp, what I'm doing is sort of spreading-ish, looking a bit patchy-ish. So this is a damp brush with paint on it, and I'm sort of tapping it on. So I have a very patchy looking branch. So it looks very patchy. So that's how you can get a sort of patchy looking right. And then for the rest of it, I'll make it look more smooth. So if you want an area that's more smooth, we would glaze it with water first. So I'm going to do this in the soft green. Okay, so glaze it all first with water. Okay, same over here, there's a little patch there. Okay, glaze it with water first. I'm going to go for my sort of mossy, licheney, greeny colour. So if you use a yellow ochre with a green, you'll sort of get this sort of dodgy colour. It's not particularly strong. And then I'm just going to tap the colour in. There you go. And then let's tap this bit on here. So we want to keep the highlight, or I've decided I'm going to keep the highlight at the top. So what you do is you just fizzle out. So here's a harsh edge, and this is all wet. So if I just wipe my brush away and just give it a little wiggle, okay, it's disappeared. So I don't have a harsh edge anymore. And then I can carry on. Let's put a dot in here and a dash in there, showing that there's something patchy going on around the claw. Okay, there we go. And let's do the same now, otherwise it looks a bit odd. So I'm now tapping a bit in there. Oh, you can just do an odd dot and you can see how it spreads if you want it to. Well, not going to do too much because some of those dots are, they look sharp. So we can't do the texture until the watercolour is dry. But if you want sort of soft, muted patterns, then that's how to do it. Okay. And then I'll just bring you a little bit up of that. Okay, so you can start to see how you can get some really nice texture going. All right, we'll let that dry a little bit more. And let's work on defining the edges of these lines. So for this, you're going to need to use a really, really sharp, really, really fine brush, or use your watercolour pencil, or a pencil, even a normal pencil actually, if I do it. Only half of you have got watercolour pencils. I'm going to get a HB pencil, and what we're going to do, you see all these lines on the wings, on these lines here? Well, I'll do it in pencil for you. If you have a fine enough brush, then you can mix the colour. If not, you can do it in watercolour pencil because it's such a fine line that we need to do. So here we go. I need a line here going down, and I need to define the line there going round, and then we need that going down there. So we need to disappear this. Right, this needs to be again a fine line disappearing. So by drawing these fine lines, we're bringing out the blue, and I'm just light pressure. So this is just a HB pencil. If you've got an appropriate cut watercolour pencil, you could use that as well. So make sure your pencil's really, really sharp. Okay, so these lines follow, just drag your hand and they follow, go all the way down the bars. Really, really lightly. This one here, yeah. So I need to pull it. So I'm just going left to right very lightly with my HB pencil. So I'm putting in the bars. It'd be easier for you to do it this way. There's so many fine lines here. You'll find it very, very difficult to do with your brushes. So if we do it this way, I think you'll find it I think you'll all be much happier doing it this way. So this is to say, it's just my HB pencil. Okay, just pulling it along. So now we can go up and pull it down. So very light pressure, pulling it down. So there's a suggestion of a wing tail feather there. Just hatching, so very shallow marks. So there's a dark line that needs to go all the way along there. So this one here isn't strong enough. And that goes all the way into there. And then this one here. So nearly done. That one there. This one here. So it's amazing how sometimes it's really helpful to have your pencil with you. So now I'm going to go into this area here, into his shoulder, with my HB pencil. I'm only going to do a tiny bit. In fact, it might even be better with my 2H pencil, I think. And then we're going to do a bit more like that. So this is the bar there. So this bit needs to come out more. So this is where I'm going to need to get my paint out. So again, with your feet, you can again use a bit of pencil to bring out. So this edge here needs to be dark. And obviously we could go in with watercolour pencils there. So we're nearly there. So I'm going to go back with my blue and I'm going to bring up the areas and just soften them a bit more. So this area here needs to be a little bit darker. And we need this area here a bit more blended down here. So I'm going back to my Caldwell blue, my turquoise colour, just to make sure I've got enough blue that I want. I mean, you may find yours is fine, but mine needs a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just do a wash. Bring this down, just so I can make this look stronger. And then what I need to do is wiggle this across in. To get this A little bit stronger there. And then this one here needs to be more brown. So that's getting filled in at the bottom. There we go, that's better. I'm just filling in the edges where I haven't quite got there. So I'm just touching up these edges a bit. So you'll notice some of the white bars are missing, which is difficult to do. So what I will probably do is go over with a bit of gouache really, or white acrylic paint. Sometimes white acrylic's better. If it was a bit bigger, you could do a bit of lifting out, I guess, because I've lost a little bit of highlight there. I just do a little bit of blotting, I can get that out. Just that bit there. There we go, that's better. Right, and then I can redefine that edge. So what's happened is I've lost that edge there. And it needs to come down there. There we go. Yeah, I've lost that a little bit. So what I'll have to do is go in there. Right, this bit needs to be darker. So let's get this bit looking properly dark. Because it's not dark enough yet. And now I'm picking up a yellow watercolour pencil. It's just an idea. If you wanted to, you could just do a few little white marks going along here. Just to keep that brightness going. Else to try, if you wanted to, is to pick up, I don't know if any of you have a rake or a chisel brush, or you could use a rounded brush, I suppose, and I want you to splinter it. So I've got one like this. It has a slight tooth to it, or split to it, and you can drag and you can get a nice splintered edge. So if you wanted to add more texture to your bird, because this is a nice light glaze, you can start to flick on it in a crisscross. So you're starting to get some more texture on your bird, or a little blemish, just to show that there's a little bit of colour coming through. So this colour here I want to be slightly warmer, so I might just pick the nearest tint of cadmium, just to make it a little bit warmer and a little bit more golden. Fairly dry brush. Okay. Just to keep that bit at the front and that bit there looking a little bit brighter. Okay, and then you've got it nice and broken. So what I can do is do a very sheer, dirty yellow. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So I'm almost scraping it on with a damp brush. Okay, it's not soaking. It's very dry. Okay, and I might make it go slightly browner because I want to really get that shadow under the chest. Okay, just to make it a little bit darker. Now I need to stop. I'm just going to wiggle that bit there. There we go. So it's very, very light. Okay, just to get that tone a little bit stronger. Oops. Now that bit's gone too dark. So what we do is we just soften that. Okay, and then I'll leave that. Otherwise it starts to look dirty. There it goes. And then that's about it, really.